David Connors, co-founder, CEO of The Swarm, all the way from San Francisco. Welcome to the Sales Podcast, man. How the heck are you?
Thanks, Wes. Great to be here.
So what's that accent? Like Swedish? What are you, South African? What? Don't tell me Texas. I know Texas. That ain't Texas.
It's from the deep south, from Australia.
So Australia, University of Melbourne, UC Santa Barbara. What the heck? Did they kick you out of all these schools, or like you're just a world traveler?
Man, I grew up in Australia, which means I grew up on a steady diet of American culture, right? Movies, TV shows. And I wanted to have that college experience. So when my university said I could study abroad somewhere for a couple of semesters, I found this spot called UC Santa Barbara, and it looked like a pretty quintessential college experience. I had a friend of mine who was in a sorority there at the time. She said, you gotta come experience this, this American college life. And it was everything that was like in the movies. It was amazing. I had such a great time that I decided to move back here about a decade later.
I mean, I don't know if that's quintessential, but it's certainly nice. I mean, holy cow. That's a beautiful campus, beautiful weather. You head inland, right? You're like, oh, wait a minute. America is a bit diverse.
Oh yeah. It wasn't a real snapshot of America. It was like a little bubble, this university town, Isla Vista. But
yeah, notice you didn't pick like Arizona State with 118 degrees, or UT El Paso, or North Dakota. Why didn't you pick one of those? Are quintessential.
There's some fantastic schools, but not quite the experience where you get to go to class with a surfboard under your arm, which as an Australian kind of appealed to me.
I know. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I've been to Santa Barbara a good bit. Have you heard of Entreport, software?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started working with them in 2014, and that was my first exposure to Santa Barbara. Like, this is a nice place, man.
Yeah.
So all over the world, you founded a few things. Got acquired. All right. I like what's going on here. So, so the whole 9 to 5 W-2 thing just wasn't your jam.
No, I wouldn't say it was my jam. I'm a reformed management consultant. So I did a stint over in London for a few years with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Straight out of college, I actually did a grad job with them. And
that's a grind, isn't it? I mean, those big consulting firms, they own you, huh?
Oh man, all night, all day, you're making decks, you're making spreadsheets, you're flying, to client site, get an email Sunday night. Hey, pack your bag tomorrow morning. You're off. Put on the suit and tie and off you go. But it's a lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
You kind of do it for a bit. You kind of learn a lot, and then hopefully you get out.
Yeah. Yeah, that is everybody I've spoken to. It's the same experience. So you started developing software. I mean, you're not a coder, right?
No, that's right. I'm on the business side. So the rough sort of story how I came to find myself in San Francisco was I was doing some consulting with some startups when I was in London, getting exposure to the startup ecosystem. And before that, I just only worked with big, massive companies. Same in Australia. Like there's wasn't much of a startup ecosystem there. There is now, which is great, with a few big stories like Atlassian and Canva sort of coming out of there. But back in the day, there was nothing. And in London, it was still pretty nascent as well. So started working more and more with these small companies that just loved the energy and enthusiasm, sort of taking something from 0 to 1. And obviously had been in California before. So that might be a nice experience getting back to California and having the opportunity to work closer to the startup scene. I didn't quite realize that the weather in San Francisco is a little bit different than Santa Barbara, though.
What was it? Mark Twain said the coldest winter was a summer in San Francisco.
That's it.
Right.
That's
true, no joke.
The fog is no joke.
Yeah. But that's cool. So you start cutting your teeth, and you've had a few things you founded, right? One was acquired, which I want to get into. But I like getting into the weeds. Like how do you identify something that has legs,
Yeah.
right? Because people ideas are a dime a dozen. Monetizing them, getting acquired. I mean, very few get to that point.
Yeah. When I first moved here, I was an outsider, right? I hadn't gone to Stanford or worked at Google or gone through Y Combinator or had one of those classic Silicon Valley check marks. I actually had about 12 weeks to find a job to sponsor my visa before the government kicked me out, right? So I
Oh,
was on a deadline to find a job. I found one with a small health tech startup, which was fantastic, kind of building like a Facebook for doctors. And I was employee number 8 there, their first growth hire. So trying to figure out this whole growth hacking world, setting up outbound funnels, going sort of deep into that whole community. And then on the side, I started just talking to my friends and their startups. They were kind of going through 500 startups at the time. I was like, how are you guys acquiring your first set of customers? Have you heard about this growth hacking, world that could potentially help? And they're like, can you come set it up for us? So I started doing that on the side, and that was the first company. This is one man consulting shop setting up outbound growth funnels for these, really 2, 3, 4 person startups. Started scaling that up, and then left my full time job to do that full time. And that was the first company that I realized that like I need to actually make revenue here. I need to be solving real pains because otherwise I can't pay my rent, right?
yeah.
And at that time it wasn't exactly a VC backed or backable kind of business; it was just pure services. But what I learned, which I think is still applicable today, is that there is no better customer discovery than doing that type of consulting service where you're in the trenches with the customer, you're controlling the outcomes, and you're getting paid to do it. And you learn so much, and you actually get to validate a lot of these ideas rather than if you're kind of sitting in a room with a whiteboard coming up with these different ideas and products, and then you finally launch something, and then the customer turns around and says, actually, we don't need that. If you had understood us a little bit better, you would know that already. Plus you get paid for it as you do it. So I think it's one of the best ways to start a company is actually to start doing consulting first and get paid for that initial customer discovery.
Is it stressful? Is it risky? I mean, because you're being brought in to grow sales, but like I said, you're validating some ideas. So that means maybe you don't have all the answers and you take a wrong step and you blow somebody's budget. I mean, how do you how do you balance like how much of what you're doing is tried and true and how much of it is bleeding edge? Like, let's see what happens when we flip this switch.
hmm Yeah, the types of clients I was working with were pretty early stage, so they were kind of up for experimenting, and they didn't have the big budgets or big brands to be able to lean on a lot of inbound or to do any big paid ads or sponsorships and things like that. So it was more of these kind of growth experiments that we were running, which lended itself really well to what I was doing. I think to your point, like as you get into a bit more of a mature org, you got to be careful with not throwing out the entire playbook, but actually just carving out little experiments. And I like, Jim Collins's metaphor of if you've got a limited amount of gunpowder, you fire some bullets, gather some data, and then you launch the cannonball, right? You don't just launch a cannonball first and blow through all your gunpowder before you actually gather some data and run those experiments.
So 'cause we hear all the time all the hacking, and I think it's slowly dying down, thank goodness. But I mean, how much of it was really hacking versus like I tell people, you want to get in shape, go do a bunch of push-ups, jog, eat less than you burn. I mean, but it's not sexy, right? Oh, I need to get a trainer. I need all these machines. Like, okay, they can certainly help,
Mm-hmm.
but if you eat like crap, um, you're partying every weekend, my $5,000 fitness routine is not going to help you.
Yep.
So like how much of it was like bleeding edge innovation and how much of it was, fellas, let's do the basics over and over and over and over and over again and close some deals.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, getting the healthy habits, right, and just getting the reps in is what's going to lead to that predictable and consistent success. Where I was sort of coming in to begin with was looking at what are these latest tools, almost being like a tech stack consultant. Like, what are
Yeah.
the latest things that are on the market? So the founders and the head of revenue wouldn't have to be spending their time basically sitting through demos all day. Then I was kind of parachuting in, setting it up for them, and moving on to the next one. But the way that that evolved was that I was then working more and more with the founders, and they were telling me, "Hey, you know what? Actually, the biggest pain point isn't acquiring customers right now because we're so small. It's actually just getting the product built, and we just don't have the engineers to do it. So we need
Mm.
help hiring engineers. And at this time, they were just losing all of their top engineers to Facebook and Google and Apple down the road. There wasn't any real remote work that was available. That whole phenomenon hadn't kind of kicked off yet. So it's very much this talent war for these 10x engineers. And that's when I started applying these growth tools and tactics, in particular the Outbound at scale for the recruiting use case. And that was then the second company, Automately, which ended up getting acquired by Sequoia Capital.
So it was a recruiting tool, or
It was a outbound sourcing tool. So for candidates, passive sourcing. Imagine kind of headhunting at scale, but any small startup could do it.
nice. And then how does Sequoia find you, and how do y'all arrive at fair value? And then what was it like sticking around for a couple of years? Because now you're part of a big company.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Was back in, but before we got there, my co-founder and I, my co-founder Jules, one of my best friends from Australia, he moved over to San Francisco with me, and we sort of put our forces together on Automately, and we had this strategy that the best channel partners would be VC firms who could then refer us into all their portcos. And a referral from an investor saying you should check out this tool or service, we're just giving you a bunch of money, is a pretty strong lead that we found would close 80-90% of the time. So we're like, all right, who do we have connections to? Who's the best VCs out there? We made a short list. Sequoia was at the top of it. And we started talking more and more with their recruiting team. They had this in-house team of 15 recruiters who, as you know, surprise, surprise, are doing their own sourcing, trying to identify candidates. They're on LinkedIn all day, every day, trying to
Mm.
find interesting candidates to talk to. So we started picking up that heavy lifting for them, starting to find and engage with these passive candidates. And then they could just do the phone screens, talk to a few candidates and hand it off to portfolio exec. So we started doing that more and more, and then worked more and more with their portfolio companies. And then at a certain point, the talent partner, Jamie Butt, we had a chat, and she said, "Look, I'm going to be transparent with you here. We're thinking about building something like what you've got. It's going to probably take us a year or two, and we instead, would love if you guys came and joined us and brought the tech in house. And at that time, we were a small company, we were bootstrapped, so the economics kind of made sense where we didn't have a huge cap table that we needed to pay off or anything like that. And we decided, hey, you know what? Sitting inside the top VC firm in the world for a couple of years might be an interesting opportunity. And as I said before, at that point we're still sort of outsiders, hadn't had the classic like check marks that that you sort of have on the CV. So I thought acquired by Sequoia would be a pretty good check mark to have, and the experience of learning and working with the team there. So went and did that, and thankfully it was actually turned out to be a great experience and probably better than what I had originally thought may have happened when I went inside.
Yeah. Was it a requirement to stick around for 2 years?
Yeah, that's right. So there was a vesting schedule for a couple of years,
Yeah.
and we're also had to be in person in the office in Menlo Park, and we'd
Oh.
actually just moved to LA about 3 months before, down to Santa Monica. So we turned the wagons around and moved back up
Oh,
to San
wow.
Francisco again.
So kind of bittersweet, huh?
Bittersweet, but my girlfriend at the time, who was doing long distance, was very happy about it, and now she's my wife, and we have two young kids together. So all's well that ends well.
So you left her? You were going to LA?
Hmm.
Man, it was meant to be, huh?
That's right.
So when did you get the itch for the next iteration?
As I was sort of coming up on that 2-year mark, I kind of knew that I was going to be able to shake off the golden handcuffs, so to speak. And I had always had that in my mind that I was kind of there at Sequoia to learn as much as I could. But really, as I mentioned before, that kind of the big org and the bureaucracy of that kind of partnership led organization in particular, just didn't sit with me. I'm just much more prefer to be at a small startup, in particular, being able to control my own schedule and destiny.
Yeah.
So wanted to move on, and when I was there, I was working with the internal product team and data science team, and we worked on this project to map Sequoia's extended network and understand all of the interesting people that were in Sequoia's ecosystem. And I sort of saw that a few things had sort of shifted on the data side that made a few things possible to build a platform that allowed a company to map and leverage their relationships. And when I left, that idea really stuck with me. So I kept kind of thinking about it, doing more discovery with founders, with investors, with salespeople, kind of understanding, okay, we've got LinkedIn, and obviously, which is great for an individual's network, but why don't we have something to leverage the collective network of a company? Why doesn't that exist? It seems like it's something that should exist. And everyone
Right.
agreed and said, yeah, it should exist. There's been a few attempts at it in the past. So I went back to the half dozen or so examples that I could find where people had tried something like this and just didn't quite work out. And systematically ticked through the different reasons why it didn't work before, but why it could work now, because a few things had shifted and changed that unlocked more data, basically, that made this now possible.
Yeah. Yeah. You see it all the time. Account-based marketing, go-to-market strategies, blah, blah, blah. I mean, 20 years ago, I started using Salesforce.com.
Mm-hmm.
And even then we could build, well, it may have been a little later, but I was building hierarchies when I was in high tech sale, like Google was a client.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I built, I was always, I would scratch my head at how amazed my bosses were at the hierarchy that I would map out in a company. Because,
Mm-hmm.
you have your, like who you're calling into, and Google's huge, as you know. So there's all kind of divisions, all kind of layers. But I mean, I had this thing mapped out to like 20 layers,
Wow.
and who reported to who, and who am I in touch with, who have I not been in touch with. And I'd never heard of go to market or account based marketing. I don't think those were even terms 10 or 20 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. But it was
Mm-hmm.
just common sense to me. It's like, if I'm calling on you, well, who's your boss? Right? Who's his peer?
That's
Who
right.
who reports to you? Right? Just, and you could map that out in Salesforce. There's a lot of things I don't like about Salesforce, but man, you can build out a hierarchy. and,
Mm-hmm.
so so it's interesting that that didn't exist, because this was only a few years ago, right? Like
That's
when
right. And
when
I
did you?
think that you're exactly right that enterprise sales folks and the top 1% salespeople have been doing a lot of this stuff already for years and decades. And I think the industry has kind of got a bit lazy, to be honest, with all of the automation and tools that have become available over the last, 5 to 10 years, but especially during the growth at all costs era, where everyone had access to these mass outbound spray and pray tools
Mm,
where you could one click send 1,000 emails to
mm,
all of your accounts, right? And you think about what that trickles down to is then you have these, dedicated SDRs and BDRs whose sole job it is to spam their TAM, basically, push out as many touch points as they can to capture the demand. And then the AEs, again, are sort of, a lot of the AEs were then just served on a platter, these really, hot leads that could then go and close. So that rigor and that actual excellence of having to do that deep dive into account mapping,
yeah,
multi-threading conversations, doing deep research, understanding the pain of the customer, being a consultant, as I mentioned before, being a real consultant as a salesperson, helping to educate them and really, all of the best practices that the top 1% salespeople already do, like every day, that just got lost somehow. And I think now the whole industry is kind of coming back to realizing that the old ways, in a sense, are kind of best. And now what we're helping is to sort of introduce some tools and technology to just take on some of that heavy lifting and help to do some of that relationship mapping and help to leverage those relationships, and in particular the trust that your company already has with your prospective customers. And it's already there. That's the crazy thing that people don't appreciate. And I certainly didn't until I sort of started going down this rabbit hole of how much trust is already built and established that is just sitting there waiting for you to take advantage of it. And what I mean by that is all of your investors on your cap table and all the people that work at the firms of your investors, they're all potential paths for warm introductions to your target accounts. Not only your investors, but all of your partners, your vendors, all of your customers and champions, all of your team, obviously, and alumni. And when you start mapping out, there's hundreds and hundreds of these warm intro path nodes you can be going through. The problem is people are lazy and they're not going to come to you and be like, hey, I've been doing my own research and looking through your target account list and I've identified 10 people that I can make introductions to. Maybe some will. Maybe some angel investors who are amazing will do that. But 90% of people won't do that. But if you do it for them and say, hey, Wes, so you're connected to the CMO at Adobe, used to work together for a couple of years. Do you mind forwarding on this note? You say, sure, man. Yeah, happy to. I'm an investor. Forward it along. Say, Mary, it's been a while. Here's a company that I'm working with. Think you'd be interested. Open to a chat. That's it. Connection. Boom. 10x higher conversion than if you'd gone cold outbound to
Yeah.
Adobe yourself, right? And 3x
Yeah.
higher win rates because you can push it through the funnel and you have that trust that already exists. And that's what is so cool about all of this, relationship based, ecosystem led, network led, partner led, whatever you want to call it. It's all kind of wraps up, I think, into what we're calling go to network, which is leveraging the network and the relationships. And anyway, I'm excited. You can tell I could talk about this for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Because I remember a friend of mine told me years ago, using a sports analogy, it's like if you have to rally the dugout, and remind them, hey, it's the bottom of the ninth, we're down by 3, let's go. Like if you got to get in their heads or up their asses, you may not have the right team.
Mm.
So it's like you give them these tools. Seth Godin talked about it. Marketers ruin everything, and salespeople ruin everything. I mean, so I love the tool. And I tell the story all the time. I just told it in the last episode. It's like when it was, I don't know, 2001, 2002 at the latest.
Mm-hmm.
And, there wasn't Facebook. I wasn't on LinkedIn. There was a database of military academy grads, West Point, Annapolis Air Force. And so I used it, and lo and behold, Sprint was a client, more of a target. We had a couple little sales into them, nothing big, but I found, hey, there's a West Point grad. It's the president of the division that I sell into.
Boom.
Boom. Exactly. I sent him an email. Boom. Within like 90 minutes, he replies, CC's his VP. I have a license to steal. Just printed money from that account, and it's like foreign. I tell people to do that. Now your software helps, I mean, the salespeople and at the corporate level. So, but do people get it? I think they still will abuse it. But I don't know. Because to me, it's common sense. Like, I'm going to scour the internet to find what I can about you. And I'm going to find some common ground somewhere, because I don't want to just go bash in my head. That's why I've said, dude, since social media, I don't think there's truly a cold call anymore. if you do any research, you find some toehold, some reason to call. A pure cold call, in my opinion, is 40 years ago, busting out the white pages and just calling, "Hey, would you like some insurance? Hey, can I sell you some kitchenware?
Yeah,
Can I
like
sell you
door to
some
door.
knives?" Knock on the door. "Hey, you want to
Yeah,
see my vacuum demo?" That's a
right.
cold call.
Hmm.
"Hey, I went to school with a friend of yours. Hey, I see, we worked at the company, different times. You got a minute?" Okay. I mean, am I crazy?
Exactly. And you can do a lot of research right up front these days to understand the company, where they're at. You know the pain points they're going to be solving. You might even know the tools they're using, what you integrate with. It
Yes.
obviously depends on your product, but you can get a long way there before you even pick up the phone. I think that the guys at Apex Revenue, Joey Gilkey and the Phone Ready Leads team do a fantastic job of this. It's off the charts cold calling, and their stuff on LinkedIn they push out all the time is great educational content of kind of how to do it the right way. But it's exactly that. You're doing your research, but you're getting really specific target accounts, and your ICP is really, really segmented and narrow. And that's the key thing. You're not just sort of blasting out to the generic ICP filters, which is like thousands and thousands of companies. But so you kind of get really narrow in, so you really actually deeply understand each company that you're talking to before you pick up the phone or send an email or whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Who are you talking about that's doing the outbound?
Apex Revenue, Joey Gilkey is the founder
Is
there.
that like a vendor that you use, or how are you
They're a
related
partner
to
of
them?
ours. Yeah, they're an outbound as a service, and
Okay.
their phone data product called Phone Ready Leads is some of the highest accuracy and validation and validated phone numbers on the market.
Nice.
Really cool. I was just chatting to them again yesterday. They're just releasing it for public consumption now. They're holding onto it for just their clients, but now they're kind of opening it up, which is cool to see.
Oh,
Apex
nice.
Revenue, check them out.
All right. I'm gonna go look them up. I'm trusting you, man.
Yeah, you're gonna get on well with these guys. They're based in Knoxville, and yeah,
And so, well, I like it. I'm still a proponent of using the phone because people say, "Oh, I zig when they zag." Well, meet in person, call them on the phone, send them a piece of mail, physical mail
mm,
with a stamp on it. What? I'm like, dude, my inboxes are filled with junk.
that's right.
You know,
Phil,
all of my social media inboxes are spam.
yeah,
My email spam, my text messages spam. Uh,
voicemail. Yeah.
yeah, and hardly anybody calls for real. I mean, it's an automated call, and even if they do bother to have a human call, the voicemails are crap. I mean, golly. So my son, he's in real estate. He's 26 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Just got his first listing in our neighborhood. So he
Yeah,
grew up here. He got
cool.
married. He lives a couple miles away, but he wants to live in our neighborhood, and he certainly wants to farm our neighborhood. He got his first listing here,
Nice.
uh, and he was up against uh, at least three other agents.
Mm,
Two live in our neighborhood,
mm,
right? And so he was the youngest by far, and he was giving me, yeah. So he's got the listing, did an open house this weekend. He's gotten to know the family. They gave him feedback, and he was like, he was just nice.
mm.
He was a
Yeah,
human. He
yeah,
was interested in getting to know them. He was not pushy. And the feedback they gave him, one guy, I mean, pushy, demanding, you wouldn't shut up, blah, blah, blah. The other guy, he was an older guy, but new to real estate. So he was ashamed about his lack of experience and downplayed it. I mean, like,
mm,
so just by being honest,
mm-hmm.
right now, but he admits he grew up the son of the sales whisperer. So I've been pounding it in his head. They've had to listen to calls as we're driving cross country. I'll be quiet. Dad's on a call. They're hearing me train, sell.
Yeah,
So, I mean, some of it has
amazing.
sunk in, but
Yeah,
still, at the end of the day, no NLP, no future pacing, no mirroring.
hmm,
Just be a human.
yeah.
I mean, are you seeing this? Is this your experience as well?
Dude, this is gonna be the trend, I think, for the next 5, 10 years plus. And the way I talk about it is playing long-term games with long-term people. What that means is you're not in this short-term transactional mindset of just trying to close this deal this week, this quarter. Instead, you're sort of taking a years long mindset and approach, and it's being authentic to your point, to be a human. And when it kind of comes down to it, you have all this AI and all the tools and the technology. Sure, it's great, but when you break it down, I think Mike Garger crafted a good summary. There's like 1,000 micro activities that go into the sales funnel, right? From the top of the funnel all the way through to close. Now, some of that is useful for to be automated at the very top. Some of the research, some of the insights. But as soon as you get into the middle of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel, you know that no human wants to buy from another robot or a machine, especially for any like high ticket, high ACV deals. You want to have a human that's accountable on the other side of the table. And that's where I think what I'm seeing a lot of folks kind of come to appreciate and realize that the human has this really central, critical point where you're working and buying from another human, the buyer and the seller. Now, the humans that are, obviously supported by these AI agents and these AI assistants that can, help us to remember things or do some research on our behalf, but it doesn't eliminate, it doesn't remove the human in any way. And I think that's where all of the, as I mentioned before, sort of this reversion back to the old way to an extent of humans working with other humans. That's how companies are built. That's how societies are built. That's how countries are run. And that's, I think, going to be the mega trend we're going to see over the next 5, 10, plus years.
Yeah. Yeah, bring humanity back, right? Because I see all these people,
Mm.
oh, join my program. You use our AI to write all of your years worth of content in 5 minutes. It's like my inbox is full. I'm deleting all of it. So who
Right.
can stand out in that crowd, right? So be human.
Mhm.
So are they giving you feedback on their calling metrics? Are they doing primarily phone call outreach for you?
So we're helping companies to leverage their network to primarily find warm intros into their target accounts, and then also to identify multi-threading opportunities. As you said with that Salesforce example, who else at the org do we have influence and connections with that we can be talking to? So the way it typically works is we've got our list of target accounts, maybe there's 500 target accounts. We're using the swarm to carve out those like 30%, maybe 40% that are warm target accounts where we have relationships. We can do warm intro parts. I'm sending intro requests to investors, to partners, to employees, and they're forwarding those along, and we're getting those connections. Sometimes it's indirect. Maybe it's not to the decision maker, but it's someone at the target account. Maybe it's the CFO that you have a strong relationship with, so you're pulling them in, and you're having this coordinated, orchestrated, sort of play on the warm target accounts. Now, for those cold target accounts, that's where you're then running these cold calling, cold emailing, social touches, sending mail, in person, all the things that folks have been figuring out and doing over the last few years, but trying to get very personalized with it. And I think there's a few things that cut through the noise that we're learning and that we're finding out. One is a human relationship, right? That cuts through the noise. That's a big signal that people respond to. If they have trust for someone who sends them an email, then they're going to be, way more likely to respond. The other thing is some product usage. We're seeing that be pretty successful, where if I can see that you're in our product, that you're interacting. So for us, it's folks maybe who've signed up for a free trial and I've invited some other folks to share the networks, and they started looking through, and then maybe they got stuck somewhere or they kind of didn't get all the way through the onboarding. We can then kind of reach out to them. That's a very soft, warm touch where they're already
Yep.
known to us. Kind of, and some things like that. So there's more of these other first and third party intent signals. I think that's a big play I'm seeing at the moment, is signal based selling, which, again, it kind of gets you a little bit of the way there, where it's just more segmented ICP that, okay, they're a good fit, and maybe there's some interest that they're actively looking. They're in the 3% of the market that's actively looking to buy right now. But at the end of the day, I think buyers are very human, and some of the consumer type way that we buy as well. You got to ask your friends, hey, like, we're about to go get a new CRM. What CRM do you guys use? I'm going to ask my folks in my community, my sales community, my revenue leaders community, whoever it is, what's everyone else using these days? And again, that's part of the network approach that we're sort of evangelizing, that all these conversations are happening without actually talking to the salesperson. So you kind of want to be arming all these potential champions with the information and the collateral that they need when they come across one of those opportunities. But it's messy and it's hard, and we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to design the playbook and help all our customers navigate this transition, this change. But it's an exciting time, because I think it's a lot more human than just sitting behind a computer and clicking send emails to 1,000 people.
Yeah, with typos in their names, which I get every day.
Yeah, that's right.
Are companies putting too many layers between the outreach and the salesperson? Because I see the BDRs, SDRs, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, why even have a salesperson? I mean, you're just teeing up these deals. Because, like, I've always heard from salespeople, right? I'm really good once I get in front of a qualified prospect. And I'm like, hey, fool, your job is to get in front of a qualified prospect. Oh, no. I mean, we've got marketing, we've got a CRO, a CMO, we've got BDRs, SDRs, all these. Oh, so they're just teeing stuff up for you to carve up. I mean, okay, you're McDonald's. Yeah, you want to supersize that? Like, why do I pay you anything more than 30 grand a year? If you're just the dead meat is just falling in your lap, like.
Yeah, like basically just like the legal team, like getting you to sign a contract, like
yeah.
So yeah, I think the trend I'm seeing, especially as folks need to right size and be more efficient with their spend and grow more efficiently, because money is more expensive now. We're out of the zero interest rates policy era. Now money's more expensive. All companies are looking, how do we tighten our belt? The number one biggest cost on everyone's books is their employees, right? So they're thinking, do we need this many people? Do we need this many people in our sales org? And unfortunately, the realization I think a lot of people are coming to is that, as you said, we don't need as specialized roles. I think this breakdown into the SDR and then the AE, and sometimes there's even a third role in that, is all going to get bundled into one. It's going to be just the AE who's full cycle. They're doing their own pipeline generation, and maybe the SDR's role becomes more of a community manager, maybe more of a network manager. Maybe it's more on the marketing side. There's different ways this sort of evolves and consolidates. But I think we're going to see moving forward, sales teams will be leaner and they'll be doing more than they were before. And I think they'll be happier as well, to be honest. I think they're going to be enjoying this work more than when all you can have to do, especially for an SDR. The average turnover for an SDR is like 12 months, 6 months. It's no one wants to be an SDR for that long. And they always wanted to move on to actually be the AE to help to close the deals. So we can actually see a real career path for a lot of folks who can be upskilling and up-leveling themselves and not just siloed and stuck into these very highly specialized roles. Instead, can have a much broader remit of what they're doing. So that's the way I'm seeing it. But from your side, what are you seeing in sales teams?
Yeah, I'm telling people all the time. It's like, why do you have so many layers?
Right.
And it's always the case that sales and marketing are in silos. They have different objectives. So I just recorded an episode yesterday that'll go live next week with the chief sales officer and chief marketing officer of Demand Base. So, and they just wrote a book, basically, how can the sides get along? And because they are so different. And I think, like you said, people have gotten lazy, and there was cheap money, there was stupid money, and like I've sold CRMs forever, and people will come to me, a small little company, and they'll go, "Well, I want HubSpot, I want Salesforce.com." Like, why? Well, this other company, one of our competitors, they use it. And like, oh, that $700 million competitor of yours, and
Right.
you have like 7 people, and like, no, you don't need that tool right now. So it's the same thing. These small startups. Well, I came from this company, and I had an assistant, I had a BDR, I had an SDR. Blah, blah, blah.
That's right.
Okay, like your team of assistants is bigger than your entire company right now. It's like you need people that can wear many hats and juggle, because you don't have it. Oh hell. But then they don't know how to scale, right? Because the founder brings a different passion than an employee. So if I ask you, how do you sell the swarm? You're going to use different verbiage, different demeanor that's going to come through. Like, I like picking on Grant Cardone for a lot of reasons. Right? You'll see he'll get on the phone. One of his guys is having trouble closing, and he'll close the deal. I see, that's how it's done. No, you're some famous dude. That doesn't scale.
Yeah.
You did it for the buzz, but how do I take what's in your brain as a founder and create a reproducible, predictable process, right? What can the new salesperson, how do they act? How do they open the call? What questions do they ask? How do they handle tough people? How do they handle the standoffish? Boom, boom, boom. You got to have that mapped out, and then and train the crap out of them. But most they don't know how to do that. You get somebody that was a natural or good timing, right? You get some bleeding edge product, it might just sell itself. So these early salespeople think they're heroes, and it's like, dude, my 10-year-old could have made that sale.
Right.
Right place, right time. So maybe you're teaching bad habits. So you got to peel this thing back. But at the end of the day, I've always told people, you got to remember there's a human on the other end of the screen, regardless of what you're selling, So, and that goes back, David Ogilvy, man, Robert Collier, we must enter the conversation going on in the mind of the prospects, and Ogilvy, their prospect is not a moron. She is your wife, so it's like what comes around goes around, and just get back to being a human. It makes it much easier.
It's much easier and it's much more fun. That's for sure.
Yeah.
For everybody.
I mean, I tell people all the time, my very first paid sales training client when I started the Sales Whisperer was an architect that was going out on his own. And he's like, man, I gotta drum up some business. I'm like, okay. And because he was very systems oriented, right? He's an architect, but you gotta do things a certain way or people die. Right. So, and I showed him people are very predictable. How you engage, how you interact, you can elicit the responses that you want and need. And it's not being manipulative. I just want to get to the truth. I tell people all the time, hearing no early is a win. So, because old school sales trainers are like, never ask a question they can say no to. Get them saying yes, yes, yes. Get a bunch of little yeses. Because you're talking about the micro closes. One of my programs is the Make Every Sale program. Because I say to make any sale, you must make every single sale. There's a bunch of little sales along the way. So it's like, but if we are truly not a fit, hey, David, I got this great deal on tires, buy 3, get 1 free. Like, dude, I bought tires yesterday. No, this is a really good deal. It's a great deal. Maybe you can store them. I live in an apartment. I can't know. I don't drive very much. These tires are going to last me 5 years. No, it's a really good deal. No. I mean, it's like, oh, yeah. I can't overcome that. I'm going to make a note. Oh, you drive every 5 years. Is it okay if I follow up with you in 4 years? Yeah, sure. Okay, great. Let me get off the call. I'm going to put a teaser in there. I'm going to call you in 4 years. Next. But there's too many high pressure. No, you got to close them. There's a way. They got bad tires. They didn't buy them for you. They're crappy tires. They're made in China. There's a recall. Get them to switch. I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that.
That's right.
I don't want that done to my mom, to my wife, to my daughters. Don't be that guy.
When you're like trying to almost trick or you have to mislead someone to close a deal, what do you think is going to happen to the retention
Yeah.
and the satisfaction of that customer? They're going to churn the first chance they get. And the actual, for most companies, the biggest source of revenue and value comes not just from that first initial sale, but from the recurring, right? And I think that is another huge issue we're sort of seeing is a lot of these companies got shoehorned into these deals and now they're kind of waking up to it and a lot of people are churning. There's a huge churn issue in sales right now. And just net dollar retention is a huge challenge for a lot of companies. We're seeing it just plummet. You're seeing even Salesforce reported last week that their sales were down for the first time like freaking ever, right? So this is a big challenge industry-wide. And I think it comes back to the salespeople to really be great at their job, to understand the needs and the pains of the customers, and to disqualify customers if they're not a fit, to your point, because they're not going to be satisfied, they're not going to renew. And you want happy, satisfied customers. It's going to make your job easier. And you can then expand out, maybe the product's just not ready yet, and that's okay, but you can come back to them in 6-12 months, make a note to come back when that feature's ready, whatever it is that they need. And I think that, that's going to, for the whole industry, is going to be, a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. Cool, man. So I think we're going to have you back, right? We're going to do a demo of the Swarm.
Sure.
So I will cross reference to that. But until then, anybody listening to this, it's just theswarm.com, right? You offer a free trial?
Absolutely. Yeah. Free
Right.
for everyone to kick the tires. We're still early stage building all this out. So we build whatever our customers need. Happy to chat to anyone directly that's interested in learning more. And as you mentioned, you can try the product yourself. We're not trying to, push anyone into any annual contracts without them actually getting a chance to test the product themselves. And then if you like it, it's month to month beyond that.
Yeah. Very cool. You Aussies are all right, man. I don't care what they say on TV.
We're doing all right. We're slowly taking over the States, I feel like, with Margot Robbie and Hugh Jackman and, all of the Hollywood stars.
Oh, yeah, those are a couple good names. What about Crocodile Dundee, man? I'm old, dude. I remember I was an Aussie fan before it was cool to be an Aussie fan, all right? Very cool. All right, David Connors, all the way from SF or Marin. All right, let's get specific, man. I mean, specifics matter.
There you go.
So thanks for coming on the show, man. It's been great catching up.
Thanks, Wes. Appreciate it, man.
All right, man. Have a good day.
Cheers.